Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 7 of the Timelines podcast. I hope everybody had a great summer. If you're new to the show, welcome. I'm your host, Michael Pandolfo, and on the Timelines podcast, I try to bring you interesting and insightful conversations with some of my favorite people in the world of watchmaking. Maybe you've seen our guest today on his YouTube channel or his Instagram page, where he goes into some of the nitty-gritty of watchmaking. Maybe you're one of his students at Paris Junior College, or maybe you saw him here at the Watch Preserve when we did our Open Streets Festival back in the spring. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show, Garrin the Watchmaker. Welcome, Garrin.
Hey, how you doing, Michael?
Good, man. How are things out there at Paris Junior College?
So far so good. Right now we're in the summer semester. I've got 8 students currently. We're wrapping up. So one will be graduating, and then the other 7 will be returning for fall semester at the same time that I'm getting 8 new students. So we're gonna have a total of 16. We have another returning to finish up the program. So 16 total students next semester. Be busy, but I'm looking forward to it. I've enjoyed teaching so far, and it's been a great learning experience for me. So, yeah, it's going good out here.
Nice.
Thanks for asking.
Is 16 like a large class for watchmakers, or is that sort of on average?
Yes. Yeah. So, since taking over, I've had the opportunity to talk to other instructors and watchmaking teachers in the industry. And when I tell them I'm going to have a class of 16 next semester, they say, "What? That's way too big." Generally, the average student to teacher ratio in the watchmaking industry is anywhere from 6 to 8. So 16 to 1 is definitely a big class size, but we're working on getting a second instructor. It's just there's some stuff that's over my head on the college level that's having to be worked out right now, but we're working on getting that student to teacher ratio down a little bit to something a little more manageable. But yeah, right now it's a big class, and it's been a challenge, but not one that is too much to overcome. I'm the type of guy, when I'm in a sink or swim situation, I'm not going to allow myself to sink. And I think I owe it to the students to give them everything I have and make sure that they are getting the best education I can give them. So,
I guess now, since we're already talking about junior college and about the watchmaking program there, I imagine a lot of people in the watch world are really curious to know, like, what watchmaking school is like. Like, and I know we probably can't get into the entire curriculum on the podcast, but what's kind of the breakdown?
Sure.
Is it like a 2-year program, or like what's the length of the program? And then what are sort of the standards? I mean, do you guys kind of go through like every movement type or a maker and kind of know some of the quirks and hallmark elements for each and how to work on them? Or what's the kind of the first semester look like when you're looking at the bird's eye view of watchmaking school?
Sure. So we have it's a 4-semester program, and we run straight through the entire year. So you can complete the program in as little as 16 months. So that's fall, spring, summer, and then another fall semester. Some students will elect to take a summer semester off, and then it takes a whole two school years. But the breakdown is generally first semester we're getting those foundational skills. We're learning the theory of watchmaking, how watches work. We're starting to turn screws, but really the focus in the first semester is foundational skills. So like sharpening screwdrivers, working on a movement without damaging it, etc. Lubrication by the end of the first semester. And then in the second semester, we start looking at full service of manual wind mechanical watches. We start looking at quartz watches as well, and what it takes to service quartz watches, what the differences are. And then towards the end of second semester, we do escapement theory, which is, I mean, we could talk about escapement theory all day, every day, and still have more to learn. But we're focusing on getting the fundamental understanding and skills necessary to have a successful career. And really what's unique about the watchmaking industry is, you get those foundational skills, and then you go and start working in the field, and you have opportunities for additional training and continued education everywhere, all over the place. So, um, uh, yeah, we're working on getting those foundational skills, setting the students up for success, and then letting them go into the field and find that success on their own. To talk briefly about the movements and the calibers that we use, the theory portion of the class, we talk about traditional methods and how watches were made in the past, and the different things that affect the timekeeping properties of a watch, and how those things have been accounted for and either neutralized or eliminated or balanced throughout the history of watchmaking. And then we focus mostly on modern movements, because the students are expected to go and work in the modern luxury watchmaking industry. So the bulk of the projects that the students work on are Solitas. The Solita SW200 and SW300. And then once we get into the chronograph course towards the fourth semester, they start working on the SW500, which is Solita's variant of the 7750. So mostly it's Solitas, which represents generally what the modern watchmaking industry is using today. It's pretty standard. And then once they go and work for different companies, like say a student goes to work at the Breitling Service Center, they'll get training on Breitling's products from Breitling. Let's say they go to work for Richemont, they'll get training on, if they're working on IWC, they'll get training on IWC product from Richemont, et cetera, et cetera. So like I said, there's a lot of continued education opportunities students once they get out of school, and really the sky's the limit. It just depends on how far each individual student wants to take it.
That's really cool to hear. Well, I like that the program is sort of designed to be like a springboarding process, where you've got the skills and that you need to basically work on anything, but then depending on which manufacturer or where you go, then you get that specialized kind of training. And that's kind of what you did, right? Because you attended the Paris Junior College, and then shortly after you went to work for Haltom's. Is that right? Yeah, and Haltom's
Correct.
is a
Yeah.
big Rolex dealer. So.
Yeah, so I graduated and immediately went to work for Haltom's in the jewelry store environment, and I was servicing exclusively Rolex. And since Haltom's and Rolex, Haltom's is a Rolex AD. Rolex trained me. They helped me build the workshop, equip the workshop, make sure I have everything I need in terms of equipment, spare parts, resources, all that good stuff. And then Rolex actually trained me on their product. So I had the basis of understanding of theory and how to service a mechanical watch and what goes into the process of servicing a watch. And then Rolex brought me to their facility in Pennsylvania and said, okay, here's our product and what's unique about it, and this is how we want you to service our product. So yeah, it was pretty much exactly that process that I'm talking about, where PJC was a springboard, and then I went into the field and got additional training and continued my education from there.
What was that like as you were fresh out of the program and you kind of went, to, I mean, a big brand, right? Like Rolex is a brand that obviously commands a lot of attention on the market, and a lot of people, a lot of customers, I think, have really, really high expectations on how their Rolexes should run. And so as a watchmaker, fresh out of the program going in, what were those early days like? Like, what kind of pressures did you have maybe that you didn't expect, or I'm just curious to know what your time was like jumping right into Rolex.
Yeah, it was definitely a challenge going from a class where I have a controlled environment, and if I have an issue, I could always go to the instructor and say, "Hey, what's going on? I need some help." But then, going from that directly to running a one-man workshop all by myself, kind of, in the deep end without a paddle, it was definitely a challenge, and I absolutely made mistakes. Any watchmaker that says they went out of school and were like perfect from the jump and made no mistakes, they're lying. Everyone makes mistakes. I tell my students all the time, you're going to make mistakes. But what's important is learn and grow from our mistakes, and don't let those mistakes get in the way of progress. So it was definitely a challenge, but I was lucky enough to have resources from, mentors at Rolex. My instructor was always happy to help out as well. And so I always had mentorship, just not in the room with me. And really the biggest challenge straight out of school was efficiency and getting work done in a timely manner. Because in school, there's no deadlines other than the end of the semester. You got to have all your projects done. But in the real world, you have customers calling saying, "Hey, where's my watch? Why isn't it done yet?" and whatnot. And so learning to work efficiently was the biggest challenge for that first year. And, I did some of that in school, but there's only so much you can do in school to prepare for the demands of real world service. So, yeah, it was definitely a challenge. I definitely made mistakes, but during that first year or two out of school and in the field, I learned so much.
So you were talking about your early days with servicing Rolex at Haltom's, and just like one of the questions that came to mind, and I when I used to live in Cincinnati, we had a dealership out there, Richter and Phillips, who also had an in-house watchmaker. What specifically for Rolex, like in Dallas, where we have a service center over in Dallas, what kind of stuff were you taking care of in shop versus things that were sent out to the service center?
Well, the service center in Dallas has so many watches coming in from all over the country that they're trying to alleviate the pressure on their watchmakers there as much as possible. And so the goal of having watchmakers in stores, whether they be just right down the road in Fort Worth like I was, or somewhere else like Cincinnati, for example, the goal is to alleviate pressure on the service center. And so when I got my training, they basically said, do as much as you can in-house, and what you can't do in-house, whether it's due to in-house demand, or if you have something that you're just not authorized to work on yet because of trainings, or because of the age or whatever, send that into the service center. So the purpose of accounts like Haltom's and other in-house watchmakers at ADs is to alleviate the pressure on the service center. So I was working on everything that I could. Everything that I had authorization and could get parts for was done in-house.
Do you find, is it kind of like a market thing, like where the biggest Rolex markets is where they kind of have the most in-store watchmakers to help kind of field the things going to service centers? Or do most Rolex ADs have some relationship with a watchmaker?
Well, Rolex is trying to get every AD to have a watchmaker in-house, just to alleviate that demand on the service center. So I think more and more you're going to see watchmaking shops at the ADs at that level, just because there's so much demand for watchmaking now. Watch collecting has become increasingly popular over the years, and as such, more and more watches are out there needing service, needing repair, and all that stuff. So yeah, I think you'll see, no matter where the authorized dealer is, you'll see more and more watchmaking shops pop up there. Sorry, I got an alarm going off. My bad.
It's okay.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. That's a good segue though into something that I imagine is going to be a burning question for anybody in the watch space, or anybody listening to this, is the demand for watchmakers, right? Because we hear this all the time from almost everybody in the industry, that there is such a need for watchmakers and there's just not enough. So as a watchmaker yourself, and somebody who's worked on the AD side and who now is training the next generation of watchmakers, I wonder if you could just speak to that a little bit, like what you've seen as your time working at an AD and now as an independent watchmaker and a teacher, how the demand has changed in the past couple of years, and also I guess what the need is going to be, whether it's technicians or full watchmakers or people who do specialized services. How are things changing out there?
Sure. So that's a great question. Right now, demand for watchmakers has never been higher, uh, especially in like 2020 in the during COVID lockdowns. A lot of watches were bought either over the internet or as things started to reopen. Demand for watches, for luxury watches, was through the roof, and so a lot of watches were sold. And even before that, with the trends of internet blogs and watch collecting becoming a just more accessible, the industry grew and grew and grew and grew. And so now there's more watches than ever that need service, and you know, as such, there's more demand for watchmakers than there ever has been. And so you're starting to see on the employment side, the respect for watchmakers increase and the pay for watchmakers increase, and starting salaries going up and up and up and up and up. And so it's a great time to become a watchmaker. It truly has never been, in my opinion, a better time to become a watchmaker. As far as the needs, is it more technicians or full-fledged watchmakers or this or that? There's need for everything everywhere. There's demand for full-fledged watchmakers in authorized dealers and jewelry store retail environments. There's demand for assembly technicians, casing technicians, polishing technicians, all different types of technicians on the service center level. And service centers still need full-fledged watchmakers as well. So there's a lot of demand throughout the entire industry, and I think it's only going to increase. It's only going to get more and more demand and higher and higher respect for the field, and higher and higher salaries. So it's a really good time to become a watchmaker.
That's good to hear. I think especially about the salaries. I know a lot of watchmakers, and the common complaint is that up until now, it's been sort of undervalued. Everybody's okay to go out and buy the fancy watches, but then when it comes time for maintaining those watches, a lot of companies are not putting that investment into their watchmakers. Are there any manufacturers or any companies that are kind of really doing right by the watchmakers? In Texas, I think we hear a lot about like Rolex sponsored watchmaking schools and things like that. Are there companies out there that are really investing into the upcoming watchmakers in the future?
Yeah, so another great question, and I'm happy to say that there is support from every aspect, from every side of the industry for watchmaking. Without giving away too many details, at Paris Junior College, we receive support for watchmaker education from just about every major brand that you can think of. So everyone is investing in watchmaking education. A lot of the companies have their own schools. So Rolex has their own school, Richemont has their own school, Swatch has their own school, and there's as the demand for watchmakers increases, the companies that need those watchmakers are really taking note of it and really investing in education and training and really making sure that this next generation of watchmakers has the tools for success that they need. So it's a really good time, like I said, for watchmakers and for new watchmakers getting into the field, and the support for education and training has never been stronger as well. So it's very good on that front.
Are you seeing some of like the students that you have now, the large class of 16 people? Are most of these folks that were interested in watches or are watch collectors coming at it that way, or are they just kind of mechanically minded people looking for an interesting profession? I'm just curious, kind of what the Venn diagram of watch lovers who want to learn watchmaking is.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of watch lovers, or people who were at least interested in watches before coming to school, but I'd say more often than not, it's just mechanically minded people that are looking for a good profession, and they find watchmaking and they fall in love with it. So I'd say it's really probably like 50-50. People who know about the watchmaking industry, either through, family or whatnot, or just personal interest. And then, the other 50 is people who just are mechanically minded and found, watchmaking school and said, oh, that would be cool. And then they started looking into it and discovered that, that's what they wanted to do and what they wanted to dedicate their career to. So yeah, good question, but it really is 50-50. It kind of just depends on the student, depends on how they wound up at school. But it's not like people who were enthusiasts didn't come learn watchmaking most of the time. Usually enthusiasts stay enthusiasts. But for those who are mechanically minded and are interested in watchmaking, it's a great profession, and so we do see quite a few enthusiasts turned watchmakers.
So is that how kind of you got started in your interest in watches and watchmaking? I know you said that you were looking at I think your granddad's pocket watch collection and was just fascinated with those, right?
Yeah. So my granddad collected
So is that
American pocket watches. Yeah, and that's how I got into it. Because anytime I went over to my grandparents' house, I was like, "Granddad, can I see the pocket watches? Can I look at the pocket watches?" And always would take the case back off and watch it run and whatnot. And he eventually gave me an old Waltham, way too young for me to respect and appreciate what that watch was. But I loved looking at it, watching it run, and trying to figure out what each part was doing. And yeah, that's what really sparked my passion. And then as I got closer to finishing high school, I was kind of trying to figure out what to do with my career, and learned about watchmaking. I was like, well, that's perfect. I get to learn more about these watches that I've already fallen in love with from an early age, and I even get to learn how to work on them. So that was a big motivating factor for me, for sure.
Mm-hmm. So as a watchmaker now, do you collect watches, or do they sort of remain sort of a professional element for you?
Yeah, so I do collect watches to a certain degree, but my approach to watch collecting is different now than it was before I became a watchmaker. Now, my approach to watchmaking is I want to collect unique and interesting historical watches. So, like today, I'm wearing a LeCoultre Futurematic that I actually got from Nick at the Watch Preserve, and it's
Oh, nice.
yeah. So it's a super unique and interesting watch because of certain uh, uh, certain things that the movement. Uh, let me let me explain that a little better. The Futurematic is a
Yeah, you're
super
fine.
interesting watch. The Futurematic is a super interesting watch because it has a bumper automatic movement, a stop seconds function. The crown is on the back of the case instead of the side. It's got a power reserve, and then when the watch is fully wound, there's a lever that comes up and stops the oscillating weight from continuing to rotate and wind the watch. So the, it's got those really unique features that almost don't exist anywhere else in the watch world. So for that reason, it's a very appealing piece for me to collect personally. And then other watches that I like to collect are just, kind of in that same vein, either unique and interesting executions of complications that are done uh, uh, in a way that no one else has really done them, or I really love a good manual wind watch that's executed to perfection. So like I have a Longines with the caliber 12.68Z, and that's just everything that a manual wind mechanical watch needs to be and nothing more. I think it's the perfect execution of a mechanical watch. So that's kind of my approach to
So
watch collecting.
you could
Yeah,
never
yeah.
just have
No, go
something
ahead.
that's like a at a 28 24. Then like
Oh no,
you got to have something special and unique, yeah.
sure. I do love the 2824. It's a great platform, incredibly serviceable. but because I service so many of them, and because I'm in the classroom, teaching on the SW200, which is built on the same platform. It's basically a clone of the 2824. It's not as appealing to me as a collectible piece. I really tend to focus on vintage stuff more these days. The one exception to this rule is I love a good Seiko or a good like I recently purchased a Vero, which is like the Smokey. They had a Smokey the Bear collaboration, and that's got a Seiko movement in it. I think Seiko delivers great quality at the price point, and again, super serviceable, lots of interchangeability, and it's that's kind of the exception to the rule. But yeah, generally speaking, if something has a 2824 or a 200 in a modern watch, I probably won't really be looking at that. Mostly just because modern watches aren't my cup of tea. I love the vintage stuff. I love seeing the evolution of watchmaking through the years. And I have absolutely nothing against the 2824 or the 2892 or any of the other common ETA calibers. ETA makes a great product. Sellita makes a great product. They're very serviceable. It's just not what piques my interest personally.
Yeah, man, that's totally fair. It's funny. My collection was entirely modern watches before I started here at the Watch Preserve, and now I'm seeing this shift in what I like, where I'll pick up nice modern Longines, or even the Rolex Vacheron even, and I kind of look at it and I'm like, well, this is really, really pretty and really well made, but it's kind of missing that weird X factor for me, where so many vintage watches have that kind of like indescribable charm. And whether that's just patina or they were trying different style elements back in the day, or just the quirks where maybe this lume is faded a little bit, those are the things that are becoming really, really beautiful to me now. And I love that you are a Seiko guy. I love Nick makes fun of me all the time here at the shop. He's like, oh, you Seiko people, but there's a lot of value with Seiko.
He's wrong.
Especially I think with vintage. He's wrong. I'll tell him you said that. Especially with vintage stuff, personally. I was having. Yeah, you have to deny the importance of like a 6139 chronograph is crazy. It was an incredible movement.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I love my modern stuff too. My Doxa is my favorite watch in my collection, and it's got a 2824 in it. But there's something special about vintage calibers for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, to your point,
so
I think
maybe
vintage
this is
Seiko is incredible. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Yeah. No. Please go ahead, Seiko.
Yeah. So I have long been a fan of Seiko, and I will tell Nick every time Seiko comes up how wrong he is about Seiko. But yeah, the 6139 is a great legendary caliber. Really pushed the industry forward, that competition to deliver the first automatic chronograph. And Seiko's vertical clutch system is really incredible and forward thinking. And other vintage Seikos are just like they were in a world of their own, in a class of their own back in like the 70s. And classic Seiko, there's nothing like it. I love a good Seiko.
So I have to ask then, as your professional opinion as a watchmaker.
Sure.
1969, all the El Primero, the Chronomatic, and the 6139. Who did it first? Who was actually first? Because I think there's still some disgruntled people on the internet who everyone's opinion is a little different. What do you think?
I would be lying to you if I said I knew for sure. I think what's important to appreciate about that time period is that so many innovations came at the same time, and it all pushed the watchmaking industry forward. So that competition was great in terms of innovation, and we got some really cool movements out of it. The 6139, the El Primero, the Caliber 11. So it's, who's to say which one really came first, but they all came out around the same time, and they're all incredible movements. So, I'm not sure.
That's a very diplomatic answer. I'll just say it for the people. Seiko did it first. I had to get that out there. That's too funny. Hey, maybe this is a good time to jump into to some of these questions. So we put out some stuff on social media to have people submit questions that they have wanted to ask a watchmaker. So unfortunately, we don't have names. Sorry, listeners, we don't have names that are associated with all of these, just the way that they were collected. If we didn't answer your question this time, stay tuned. We will probably do part 2 with Garrin in the future. I'd love to have him back.
Yeah, I'd love to.
So, Garrin, I think you've got the list in.
Yep.
Yeah, I'd love to have you. We can do it in person with no Wi-Fi issues, hopefully.
And
maybe,
sorry about
maybe
that.
we can. Yeah, it's okay. It is what it is. We could probably maybe it'd be cool to actually bring some movements and have you kind of break down some stuff and look at some things. That'd be a really cool thing to do. So let's move into some of these questions now. So we've got, I think, at least like 12 pretty good ones. Some of these are probably kind of short answers, and some of them we can delve into a little bit. So the first question is talking about lubricants. So something that you said your first semester students work on. So this user wants to know, are the lubricants watchmakers use different in performance in any way than the ones that are put in by the manufacturers?
So manufacturers have access to different techniques and sometimes proprietary lubricants that aren't available to the watchmakers. Most of the differences, at least in the technique of applying the lubricants, those differences are more for efficiency on the production side than performance necessarily. And then, like I said, some manufacturers, some companies have proprietary lubricants that they develop with Mobius. Mobius is the leading supplier of oils and greases for the watchmaking industry. But the differences in performance might be, incrementally better here or there for, one aspect or another. Like maybe one lubricant doesn't lubricate quite as well, but it stays in place longer, or vice versa, right? But ultimately, what I preach to my students is that the cornerstones of lubrication are cleanliness, location, and quantity. So as long as you're using a lubricant that is designed for that task, and it's clean, it's in the right location, and it is of the right quantity, it will be quite effective. So even if you don't have access to the same exact lubricants that the manufacturer used, the lubricants that are available to the retail watchmaker from material suppliers today are absolutely sufficient to achieve excellent performance out of most any watch, so long as you are lubricating with cleanliness, proper location, and proper quantity.
So it didn't even occur to me that there would be different lubricants for different parts of the movement. And so I imagine those are different based off of which movements is getting the most friction. Is that right?
Sure. So friction and also the torque in those different locations. Also, something that a lot of people don't think about is the type of friction. So, for example, on a gear train, the pivots have rotational friction, right? But on an escape wheel, you have sliding friction. So you need different lubricants for the interaction between the escape wheel and the pallet fork than you need for the gear train. And even on the gear train, you have different levels of torque as you go down the train. Every transfer of energy loses a certain amount of torque. And so you need a thicker lubricant for heavier torque, and then a thinner lubricant for lower torque to achieve the best performance. And again, the most important thing, regardless of which lubricant you're using or which part of the watch you're lubricating, is cleanliness, location, and quantity.
Wow. Wow, I never would have known. um, all right, let's move on to the next question. This one's about
Sure.
watch hands. How do watch hands not fall off from being unbalanced? For example, most hands are not counterweighted, so how
Right.
do they stay on? And I guess an addendum from me too. Looking at your watches, is it how is it just pressure fit, or is there any sort of
Mhm.
adhesive or anything that's put on a handset?
Yeah, so they're just friction fit on the posts that are driving them. So there's no adhesive involved. It's just the hole on the hand is a few thousandths of a millimeter smaller in diameter than the post that it goes on. And so as you install them, the post kind of exerts pressure on the side of the hands to hold them in place. And the reason that you don't need counterweights is that they're not super heavy. Hands are generally pretty thin. They're either stamped out of a sheet of metal or cut from a sheet of metal and then filed down. So they're usually there's not enough weight to really need a counterbalance so long as the hand is friction fit securely and it's tight. Now sometimes a watch comes in and it's not, the hand is not tight enough, and there are some methods of tightening the hands, but sometimes you just have to replace the hands if they're too far gone, or if there's no way to properly tighten them again. And that's why it's important, when you do a service, to be careful as you remove and reinstall the hands so that you don't damage the holes in the hands or the posts that they go on. Because obviously we want to keep the original hands when possible, and so keeping that friction fit as secure as possible is very important.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Um, this next question is of significance to me because I dive. I use my dive watches the way they're made to be used. And everybody always talks about gaskets, right? So
Yep.
this question: do gaskets wear differently during the winding of a push-pull crown versus a screw-down crown? As in, is there more or less strain on the gaskets when
Mhm.
hand winding in either mechanism?
So, as far as more or less strain, I'm not really sure, but the type of strain is different because on a push pull crown, the gasket is usually in the crown, like in the recess of the crown, and as you're winding it, it's turning against the
Mm-hmm.
rim of the crown tube. And then on a screw down crown, the the gaskets are either on the winding stem or somewhere on the inside of the crown, like on a tube there, or they're on the inside of the crown tube, and so it's like a rotational pressure against the edges. But the most important thing for gaskets to ensure water resistance is that they're not compromised, not worn out and dry and cracking, and lubricated properly. So anytime your watches are serviced, especially dive watches or something like that is designed to have water resistance of over 100 meters, it's important to make sure that those gaskets are replaced and lubricated during the service process to make sure that water resistance is in tip-top shape.
Moving away from these submitted questions, just a question that
Sure.
I always get different answers on depending on who I'm talking to, is that issue of water resistance, and I feel like this could be another entire sub segment if we wanted it to be.
Mm-hmm.
But I know plenty of people that say, oh, this watch is rated to 30 or 50 meters of water resistance. It doesn't have a screw down crown, but 50 meters is 50 meters, so I'm going to take it swimming, and the watch is fine. And then I know some
Mm-hmm.
people that say, oh, it's 100 meters with a screw down crown. I shouldn't even take that in the shower. So I wonder if you could just speak a little bit to what your opinions are on water resistance and what you've maybe
Sure.
seen. I'm sure you've worked on water damaged watches before.
Oh yeah.
And just
Oh
speak
yeah.
to water resistance just a little bit.
Yeah. So the big difference between a watch that I feel comfortable taking in the water and a watch that I don't feel comfortable is a screw down crown. Not necessarily because I think that a push pull crown cannot ensure water resistance, because it can, and you can test the water resistant capabilities of a watch with a push pull crown. But if that crown gets snagged on something and is pulled out, that can compromise the water resistant capabilities of that watch, and the watch can flood. When you have a screw down crown in place, you're much more secure, and the risk of the crown coming out underwater is mitigated. That being said, I never take my watches in the shower ever because two reasons. One, the soaps and different chemicals in the soap can get stuck in between bracelet pins and whatnot, and they can cause some rusting and pitting on lower quality steels, and then also because heat causes like hot water will cause the gaskets to expand, and then once you get out of that water and it's in a cold environment, say you take your watch off and set it on the counter, and the granite counter is cold, for example, then those gaskets they're going to shrink, and that back and forth between super hot and expanding and super cold and shrinking will cause the gasket to crack and dry out much faster. So I always tell people, even if it's a dive watch, don't take it in the hot tub, don't take it in the shower, just because of the heat. And then in the shower, the soaps can also cause damage over the long term. And also, the soap gets stuck in between bracelet links, and then that's dirty. And then when the watchmaker services it, they get a lot of wrist cheese, and that's no fun.
It's not watchmaking without wrist cheese, that's for sure, right?
Yeah, no, it definitely isn't.
Yeah. Awesome, valuable intel. Thanks, man. All right, let's move on to the next question. What do we have here? Okay. So this person wants to know, when servicing or regulating a watch movement, does it matter if the movement comes COSC certified from a brand, or can you always regulate the watch to a high level of accuracy regardless of how it comes from the factory?
Yeah, this is a great question. So generally speaking, if a watch is well made, a good watchmaker can regulate it rather precisely. There are some things that are not under our control on the retail side of things. There's some things that are built in at the point of manufacturing, so like material quality or temperature compensation. If you don't have certain temperature compensation measures in place at the point of manufacturing, you can't really add that later on. So that's really what separates a COSC chronometer from just a regular grade of caliber. But I can still get a standard ETA 2824 to run really precisely. It's just going to vary a little more in different temperatures than a chronometer grade movement that has a glucidur balance wheel, for example, or better temperature compensation properties or higher quality materials, things like that.
Would you say then that, so for something that is COSC certified, like a base caliber, like an ETA or something, is that kind of the biggest difference then, is material compensation and temperature regulation?
Yeah, absolutely. So materials used, what separates a standard 2824 from the chronometer grade 2824 really is the glucidur balance wheel. Glucidur is a compensating metal alloy invented by a guy named Guillaume, who won a Nobel Prize in physics for the invention. But basically, it is a self-compensating component that, as temperature changes, it's not going to shrink and expand as much as the standard brass balance wheel that you'll find on your standard ETA 2824. So that's the main difference, is the glucidur balance wheel.
Awesome. Yeah, I had no idea. That's really cool. Okay, we got time for a couple more questions. So, all right, I guess we'll just keep going down the list. So what are some innovations that have occurred in terms of performance of regular time only movements over the past few decades? For example, silicone hairspring or synthetic lubricants. Are there any other major accomplishments that come to mind?
Yeah, definitely. So silicone hairsprings and synthetic lubricants are great innovations. Silicon hairsprings can provide a higher level of chronometry and magnetic resistance, and synthetic lubricants can extend the service interval between services. But some other things that come to mind are ball bearings on oscillating weights, which reduces the wear. So posts on like an axle on an oscillating weight is subject to shock damage and can wear out if the watch is running dry, like if it's past time for a service, but the watch is still being used. That can cause a lot of damage. So ball bearings have overcome that for sure. The Edacron regulation system, which is if you look in the back of an ETA or a Sellita, or even Seikos these days have them. There's like these little kind of like oval shaped brass pins, and that's a huge innovation over the traditional regulating pin system, because you can adjust the watch more precisely and much more easily, much faster. And also there are some isochronal properties of the Edacron system that kind of fixes this one error caused by regulating pins. It's called the Kaspari effect, where basically as the spring is breathing, the length of the spring behind the pins is it's expanding and contracting. It's being pulled and pushed, and so that makes the effective length of the spring longer and shorter depending on which side the spring is breathing. And so the Edacron system actually adjusts for that by rotating the pins rather than just pinching them together. So the Edacron is a huge advantage over traditional regulating pins. And sorry if I'm getting too in the weeds. I know that's kind of some higher level watchmaking theory stuff.
It's cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's really interesting. We're definitely gonna have to. I was gonna say we're definitely gonna have to bring you back for a part 2, because there's just so much to unpack within each little thing.
Sure.
Yeah, it's fascinating to listen to. Do you have anything else to say on the last of that, or do we move on to the?
Yeah. So another couple things that come to mind are free sprung balance wheels, which don't have regulating pins, but instead have blocks or screws or pins, or not pins. Something to adjust the moment of inertia of the balance wheel without pins, and then that completely gets rid of errors from the regulating pins. And then also we've seen a lot of work put into increasing the power reserve of watches from the previous standard of about 50 hours to closer to like the 72 hour range. So yeah, a lot of thought has been put into technological advancements and just making the user experience that much better over the last few years.
Yeah, I remember I used to have a Seiko SPB143, and just the 72 hour power reserve on that was amazing, because you can put it down on a Friday, not wear it over the whole weekend, and pick it up on Monday and it's still going.
Yep.
And kind of once you have that long of a power reserve, it's kind of a pain in the ass to go back to 48 hours or so.
Yeah, really, it can be
you kind of get used to that life of luxury. Yeah, definitely.
That's right. Yeah.
Let's move on. I'm gonna skip one of these questions because I think this one is kind of a nice one to wrap up on, because we are a vintage watch shop here after all. So this person wants to know, will modern watch dials age like older dials, or are they so high tech and the materials are so good now that they'll basically remain unchanged forever?
Yeah, so this is kind of a tough one to answer because, really only time will tell. But there has been a lot of effort by manufacturers to make sure that their dials look the same for years to come. I can say for sure that Superluminova is not going to age the way that Tritium does. The claim from manufacturers of Superluminova is that if Superluminova comes out of the factory white, it will be white for eternity, because there's no, it's not radioactive, so it's not like breaking down over a half-life and whatnot. So allegedly, Superluminova will stay the same color forever. As far as the dials themselves, That really depends. I'm sure that some dials being produced today are going to fade. I'm sure they'll crack at some point. Just like the finish and that outer layer will crack at some point. And the sun is pretty powerful, so I'm sure that at least some modern dials that are being produced today are not going to be impervious to the wrath of the sun. So I'm sure we'll see some patina, but like I said, only time will tell.
It's just something that makes the vintage watches that we have with really even, beautiful patina a little bit more special, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, love that. Garrin, man, this has been, we've got still like so many more questions, but we're kind of past our 45-minute mark here. We could get into the weeds on more questions of these, so we're definitely going to have to do a part 2 at some point.
Yeah, for sure.
But
and
man, thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, sorry, the delay keeps killing us, but
it keeps messing with us. Yeah,
it's brutal. I would love to come in-house and record with you there, so that we don't have to deal with Wi-Fi, and we can tackle some more of these questions, and I can go more in depth about some of the more advanced theory stuff that I'm talking about. Or the listeners could come to Paris Junior College and learn directly. So,
yeah, you got to fit the plug in, and that's a great segue. I was gonna say, where can the people find you, man, if they're not familiar with their work? I know you're on YouTube. I know you're on Instagram. Drop those handles, and what else do you have going on these days?
Yeah, so I'm Garrin the Watchmaker on YouTube, Garrin the Watchmaker on Instagram. And I also recently started a Instagram page for the watchmaking program at PJC. So it's at PJC Watchmaking. So that's kind of my pet project right now. The content has been a little bit, it's kind of been difficult to maintain a steady stream of content as I'm teaching and as things start picking up here towards the end of this semester and the start of a new semester. But I try to create interesting and engaging content that can also be somewhat informative and educational for the enthusiasts out there. And that's really all I have going on is teaching and making content and servicing watches. That's really my whole life. That's kind of all I do. But that's where you can find me.
Nice. You're living the dream, man. Hey,
yes,
Garrin, I hope you have a great rest of your weekend, man. This has been a lot of fun, and we got to set up a part 2 for sure. Thanks so much for coming on today, my friend. Take care. We'll see you on the next one.
All right. Thanks, Michael. Have a good one.